two quick disclaimers. If I sound really gross, it's because I'm just coming out of the cold. And if I sound really on edge, it's because my entire family is here today, despite the fact that I did not tell them anything about this, and I have no idea how they found me. But I am Anna Turner, and I'm Owls Eat Mice on Twitter, and I'm here to talk about Mystic Messenger. And because it's spooky month, I'm here to talk about the spooky bits of Mystic Messenger, particularly how it evokes the idea of the uncanny time and time again. So what is the uncanny? Well, for now we're going to pretend that we didn't just hear someone explain the whole unheimlich, unhomely thing. And we're going to say it is a feeling that is somewhere between home and the unknown, and that when Freud uses the term unheimlich, it literally translates to unholy. And I really like this fact. Oh, sorry. And I really like this fact because it tells you a lot about what the uncanny is, the fact that it's really rooted in the familiar, it's rooted in things that we experience every day, and it takes those things and it just changes them just enough to make them uncomfortable. Freud tells us that the uncanny is that species of the frightening that goes back to what was once well known and had long been familiar. To kind of show this, I've just put up a picture of Mystic Messenger here and WhatsApp, because right off the bat, Mystic Messenger is a phone game, it's a dating sim that you can play on your mobile. And it really plays with that dynamic. It presents itself, rather than presenting itself as a visual novel, as a lot of dating sims do, it appears like a chat app. And it has a lot of features that are really similar to WhatsApp, for example, but just different enough for it to start to put you on edge. Now, what Freud really likes about the uncanny sensation is how it applies to people and things that remind us of people. He says that we have particularly favourable conditions for generating feelings of the uncanny if intellectual uncertainty is aroused as to whether something is animate or inanimate, and whether the lifeless bears an excessive likeness to the living. And I think this is really interesting when you apply it to dating sims, because they're kind of built around this principle. In dating sims, you get all these characters that you can romance that are fleshed out individuals with specific personas and characters that make it worth wanting to try and make each and every one of them your boyfriend at some point. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, you know that it's a game. You know that they're programs. You know that if you put the right answers in, they'll respond positively. And that fact that they're positioned between being a person and being a plaything is part of how the game is marketed, it's part of its appeal. But under the right conditions, it can also be really creepy. Like we see here. This is a part in the game that I think occurs in every group, where Zen has a dream. And in that dream, he dreams that you, the player, were an imaginary person, and that he thought you were just a robot saying program things. And you can reply by saying that, to be honest, I am using an app that only lets me say program things, which is a really weird thing to select on an app from a list of program things. And this freaks him out even more. But he says at the end of the dream, it was actually all of them that were robots saying program things, which is, of course, the truth. And it's a really weird moment, because this is the truth. This is what makes it comfortable for us to play with the game and to explore different fantasies in a safe environment. We know that they are robots saying pre-programmed things. But the moment that he says this makes him all of a sudden seem really, really human. The fact that this would even be an anxiety for him actually brings our attention to that line between the inanimate and the animate, and makes it seem much, much thinner. You could say that we might both be robots, in which case it tells you that that's a great twist and we should write something about that. But, of course, it has to be horror. And that was the line that really got me thinking about this talk and got me thinking about the game in a whole different way. Because he's just saying things that we know about otome games, but he's saying things that kind of sell us on these games. But to him, when he puts them out blankly like that, the idea of a little app in your phone with a load of little robot boys in it that you can flirt with, well, when he puts it like that, it has to be horror, which I think is really interesting. So here's a similar part. This is from Yusung's bad group, basically. You can get a chat room immediately after Zen's dream, where he says that, yeah, of course we're all robots saying program things, did you only just realise now? And it's really creepy, and things rapidly go downhill after that. If you're seeing this chat, it is not a good sign. You've done something wrong at some point in the game. But yeah, Freud paraphrases another philosopher when he says that one of the surest devices for producing slightly uncanny effects through storytelling is to leave the reader wondering whether a particular figure is a real person or an automaton. And that's something that Mystic Messenger does a lot and on purpose all the time, and I find that really interesting because it draws your attention to something that is kind of a feature. That question can kind of be there at the back of your mind when you're playing any kind of dating sim, but Mystic Messenger in particular draws your attention to it again and again and again. Sorry, Mum. So why does it have to be so sexy all the time? There are loads of books and plays and artworks that are about puppets and dolls and clockwork automatons. And so often in those plays and shows and books, there's also someone in them who's saying, this is great, this is fantastic, this is a modern marvel of science. When can I sleep with it? And in Mystic Messenger, you're that person. You're that person pressing the buttons going, this is cool, this is great, these characters are all really different, when are they going to be my boyfriend? And so here's the Magic Toy Shop by Angela Carter. Here's a costume for a character called Olympia, who's from an opera about a mechanical doll that a young man falls in love with. And here is Yusong saying very dirty things to me at 8 o'clock in the morning for some reason. Sorry again, Mum. So why? Why is this the case? Well, Freud, as Freud often does, goes back to childhood. But when he's looking in childhood for the root of this uncanny sensation, this question about the inanimate and the animate, he doesn't find fear. What he actually finds is desire. He says that children are not afraid of their dolls coming to life. They may even want them to. Here then, the sense of uncanny would derive not from an infantile fear, but from an infantile wish. Which I think is really interesting because it shows that as well as fear, when it comes to the idea of like puppets coming to life, there is some desire that comes from childhood. And as we mature, it makes sense that that desire would mature and that it would take on more adult themes. So here's another aspect of the uncanny. This is shadows and doubles and things that repeat and doppelgangers and stuff like that. And there's a huge quote here from Freud, but what you really need to take away from it is the fact that Freud believes that we really hate it when things repeat, as demonstrated by you all having to listen to that unhomely thing twice tonight. But the game, again, kind of plays with that idea. So when you join the game, you're joining an organisation, you're taking on a new job, and it's the job that used to belong to a character called Rika, who's pictured there in the corner. And she's no longer there, and you're taking her place. You have access to her emails, you have access to her apartment, you have access to all sorts of personal information about her. And this leads to other characters comparing you to her more and more and more, particularly Yusong, as you see there. I know that you're not like Rika, but you two are so similar, so alike. And he does this again and again and again. And it's really weird, and it's really uncomfortable. And lots of people have picked up on the fact that it's really strange and uncomfortable, which I think demonstrates the fact that people don't like things that repeat, and what we don't like to see repeated particularly is ourselves. But here's the last part of that quote from Freud, where he talks about the last part of being scared of repetition is the fear of the constant reoccurrence of the same thing, the same characters, the same destinies, and the same misdeeds. And I think that's interesting in regards to Mystic Messenger, but also in regards to all dating sim games, because they're designed to be replayed, they're designed to be repeated. They're sold on the fact that there are multiple endings, there are multiple characters in this game that you can make your boyfriend. And again, so there's a quote from 707 there, which says, "Weren't you lonely without me?" which is a message that he sends to you privately. But there's a glitch in the game, and I think it's a glitch, where sometimes if you restart the game, this is the first message that you receive from him. And the kind of Mystic Messenger fan community has picked up on this and creates all sorts of wild theories around it. This idea that, oh God, what if Seven's like self-aware and he knows that you keep playing this game again and again and again and you're dating all of his friends and then you're coming back for him. But it's a really scary thought, and the fact that people have picked up on this and taking it to that extreme, I think, shows that we're a little bit uncomfortable with that constant reoccurrence. Especially, so the same characters, yeah, you do see the same characters again, but the same destinies, again, it's an app where you can only have pre-programmed responses. There are multiple endings, but they are finite. This is a telephone conversation with 707 where he asks you if you're a student. And the responses you can say is, I am, I work in an office, or why are these the only options? I'm neither a student or an office worker. And it's kind of drawing your attention to the fact that this game is limited, you're limited in what you can say, you're limited in what you can do, and to an extent you are going to repeat those same destinies and those same misdeeds. So going a little bit beyond Freud now, to Julia Kristeva, who developed a theory about the abject, which is definitely built on Freud and has a lot of the same ideas. But it goes a little bit further than that, and she defines the abject as that which disturbs identity, system, order. What does not respect borders, positions, rules, the in-between, the ambiguous, the composite. And lots of those words maybe ring bells with stuff that we've already talked about, Doesn't disturb identity, definitely, especially with Rika, especially with like Yusong's constant need to compare you with Rika and to make you take her place. System, order, borders, so all of that fourth wall breaking, all of those meta comments about the game, about them being robots, about all that. It doesn't respect borders. The fact that it takes place in real time, that you have a job to do, like Mystic Messenger is basically a full-time job. Like it holds you hostage for 11 days. And so yeah, it doesn't really respect that border between life and between play. The in-between, the ambiguous, the composite, to me, that kind of signals that idea of the uncanny and being between lifelessness and life. But what really interests me about Julia Kristeva's work is she doesn't just point to things that are scary, she doesn't just show us examples and give us definitions. She goes more into what it all means. So why do these things scare us? Why is it important? Why do we spend so much time thinking about it, writing about it, making things that scare us, and playing and reading and watching things that scare us? What does it all mean? One of the questions she comes up with is this, which I really love. She's talking about being scared of being bitten by a dog. And she says, am I afraid of being bitten? Or am I afraid of biting? And I really like the idea that this takes external fears and asks the question, what if we're afraid of them because they tell us a lot about internal anxieties? Am I afraid of that dog biting me because I'm afraid that I could lose control and be that rabid, biting dog one day? And I love this way of looking at fear and this way of looking at things that scare us, and I think it's really cool if you apply it to Mystic Messenger. You end up with all sorts of really uncomfortable questions like, am I afraid of being intimate with something that is unresponsive and cold and mechanical? Or am I afraid that during intimacy I will be found cold and unresponsive and mechanical? Am I afraid of falling in love with something I suspect is a machine? Or am I afraid of being loved and being suspected of being a machine? And again, Mystic Messenger doesn't let us stomp these fears to the back of our heads. It brings them to the forefront with all of those kind of meta questions and meta comments, and doesn't let us really escape them or look away from them. And that, to me, is really, really spooky. That's all I really have to say. Here are some of the books I read. You can ask me about them.